The red wine hit Caroline Whitmore's face like a slap, cold and sharp and utterly unexpected. For a moment, she sat frozen at the dinner table, 8 months pregnant and struggling to process what had just happened. Burgundy liquid dripped from her chin onto her cream maternity dress, the nicest one she owned, bought on sale specifically for this family dinner at her in-laws' estate. "Oops," Marcus said from across the table, his hand still holding the empty wine glass. His voice carried no apology, only cold satisfaction. "How clumsy of me." Around them, the dinner party fell silent. Marcus's parents, Richard and Patricia Whitmore, sat at opposite ends of their mahogany dining table, their expressions carefully neutral. Marcus's sister Jessica and her husband occupied the middle seats, their forks suspended mid-air. And beside Marcus, close enough that their shoulders touched, sat Sienna Hart in a burgundy dress that probably cost more than Carrie's monthly salary. Sienna's perfectly manicured hand covered her mouth, but Carrie could see the smile underneath. Could see the triumph in those ice-blue eyes. "Marcus." Carrie's voice came out steady despite the wine burning her eyes, despite the humiliation coating her skin like acid. "That was deliberate." "Was it?" He set down the glass with deliberate care. "I suppose we'll never know for sure. Just like we'll never know for sure if you deliberately tried to trap me with this pregnancy. If you're enjoying this story, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, I love hearing from you. Now back to the story, because what happens next is absolutely wild." The words landed like physical blows. Carrie's hand moved instinctively to her swollen belly, protecting the daughter she'd been carrying for 8 months. Their daughter, conceived during what Carrie had thought was a loving marriage, before she'd discovered the text messages and late-night calls and the hotel receipts that told a different story. "I think," Patricia Whitmore said carefully, breaking the awful silence, "perhaps we should all take a moment to." "No." Marcus stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "No more moments. No more pretending. I'm done, Mother. I'm done with this entire charade." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope that looked too official, too prepared, to be anything good. The motion was practiced, rehearsed, like he'd been planning this moment for weeks. "Caroline, I want a divorce." The envelope landed on the table in front of her, scattering wine droplets across the white tablecloth. Carrie stared at it, her mind struggling to process the casual cruelty of the moment. He'd invited her to his family's Sunday dinner, let her believe they might be working through their problems, and ambushed her with divorce papers while she was 8 months pregnant. "Marcus, this is hardly the appropriate venue," Richard Whitmore said, his corporate attorney voice emerging. "Perhaps you and Caroline should discuss this privately, everyone here already knows the truth." Marcus gestured broadly at the assembled family. "They know I've been unhappy for months. They know this marriage was a mistake from the beginning. And they know," he turned to Sienna with a smile that made Carrie's stomach turn, "that I've found someone who actually makes me happy." Sienna stood, moving to Marcus's side with fluid grace. At 27, she was 5 years younger than Carrie, with the kind of effortless beauty that came from professional styling and expensive skincare. Her hand settled on Marcus's arm with possessive familiarity. "I'm so sorry you had to find out this way," Sienna said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "But Marcus and I have been trying to spare your feelings for months now. We thought it would be easier to wait until after the baby was born, but," she paused, her expression shifting to something almost pitying, "Marcus deserves to be happy. And you deserve to be with someone who doesn't find you so exhausting." Carrie felt something cold settle in her chest. She'd known about the affair, had suspected for 2 months, confirmed it 3 weeks ago when she'd seen them together at a restaurant across town. But she'd held on to hope that Marcus would come to his senses, that he'd remember the vows they'd made 5 years ago, that their baby would matter more than whatever midlife crisis was driving him into another woman's arms. That hope died as she watched Sienna's hand slide around Marcus's waist, watched her husband lean into the touch with obvious comfort. "How long?" Carrie asked quietly. "Does it matter?" Marcus replied. 8 months, Sienna answered, unable to resist. "We met at the charity gala in January. The one you didn't attend because you were too tired. The emphasis on the last word was deliberate, cruel. 8 months. Carrie had been 3 months pregnant then, struggling with morning sickness and exhaustion. She'd encouraged Marcus to go to the gala without her, told him to network and have fun. And he'd met Sienna Hart, event planner extraordinaire, and begun an affair that had been running parallel to their marriage for more than half of Carrie's pregnancy. I see. Carrie reached for her napkin, wiping wine from her face with as much dignity as she could muster. Her hands shook slightly, but she kept her voice steady. And you chose tonight, in front of your family, to tell me this because I'm tired of pretending. Marcus's voice rose with frustration. I'm tired of coming home to someone who's always tired, always complaining, always making me feel guilty for wanting more from life. You've let yourself go completely, Caroline. You've become boring and domestic and utterly uninteresting. The cruelty was breathtaking in its casualness. Carrie felt tears threaten, but she blinked them back furiously. She would not cry in front of these people. Would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. I'm 8 months pregnant with your child, she said evenly. What exactly did you expect me to look like? Sienna manages to stay beautiful, Marcus replied, gesturing to his mistress. She takes care of herself. She makes an effort. Carrie's gaze moved to Sienna, taking in the designer dress, the perfect makeup, the figure that showed no signs of pregnancy or weight gain or the physical toll of carrying another human being. Something flickered in her memory, Sienna's hand on her flat stomach, Marcus mentioning something about our future in a text message Carrie had seen. Are you pregnant? Carrie asked directly. Sienna's smile was radiant. 12 weeks. We just found out last month. The table erupted. Jessica gasped. Patricia's wine glass slipped from her fingers. Even Richard looked shocked, his composed facade cracking. Carrie couldn't finish the sentence. The timeline crashed over her like a wave. If Sienna was 12 weeks pregnant, that meant Marcus had been sleeping with both of them simultaneously. Had been building a second family while pretending to care about his first. I know this is a lot to process, Marcus said, his tone suggesting he was being remarkably patient with her slowness. But Sienna and I are in love. We're planning to get married as soon as the divorce is finalized. And yes, we're starting a family together. A real family, with someone I actually want to be with. Carrie stood slowly, her movements careful despite the trembling in her legs. 8 months. Pregnant made quick exits impossible, but she needed to leave before she completely fell apart. The papers, Marcus said, gesturing to the envelope. I need you to sign them tonight. My attorney wants this handled quickly. Tonight. Carrie's voice was flat. You want me to sign divorce papers tonight, after you've humiliated me in front of your family, after you've announced you're having a baby with your mistress. I think it's best for everyone if we handle this efficiently. Marcus pulled out his phone, checking something with obvious impatience. I've already drafted a settlement offer. You'll get the apartment, I'm keeping the house, obviously. And I'll pay child support according to state guidelines. Very generous, really, considering you brought nothing to this marriage. The casual dismissal of 5 years together, of the life they'd built, of the child she was carrying, made something snap inside Carrie's chest. I brought nothing, she repeated softly. Well, what did you bring? Sienna interjected, her voice light and conversational, as if they were discussing a business transaction. You worked as a loan officer at some regional bank. Marcus built his career, bought the house, created the lifestyle you enjoyed. Let's be honest about who the breadwinner was in this relationship. Carrie thought about correcting her, about explaining that loan officer had been a cover, a way to hide from her family's legacy while trying to build a normal life. But she stayed silent, watching Sienna with new understanding. Sienna's right, Marcus continued. I've set up a very fair division of assets. The joint account will be split, you'll get your half, minus what I've already transferred for the wedding expenses. What joint account? Carrie asked, though she already knew the answer. I cleared it out this morning. Move the funds to a separate account in my name only. Marcus shrugged. My attorney said it was perfectly legal as long as I account for it in the settlement. You'll get your half back eventually. Eventually. The joint account had held $18,000, carefully saved over 5 years for emergencies and their daughter's future. Money Carrie had contributed equally from her salary, despite Marcus's claims about being the breadwinner. You stole our savings to pay for your wedding to your mistress, Carrie said, making sure everyone at the table heard clearly. You stole money I saved for our daughter to fund your life with another woman. It's not stealing if it's my money. Marcus's voice hardened. And let's not pretend you were contributing equally, Caroline. Your salary was a joke compared to mine. Everything we had, I built. Carrie felt her daughter kick hard against her ribs, as if even the baby was protesting the injustice of the moment. She placed her hand over the movement, drawing strength from it. I need to leave, she said quietly. Sign the papers first. Marcus held out a pen. We can get this started tonight. No. The word hung in the air, simple and absolute. Marcus's expression shifted from confident to annoyed. Caroline, don't make this harder than it needs to be. You have no leverage here. No resources, no family to run to, no options except what I'm offering you. He was right, of course. Carrie's mother had died when she was 16. Her father had passed 3 years ago. And her grandmother Helena, the only family she'd had left, had died 4 months ago, though Carrie had been too overwhelmed with pregnancy and Marcus's growing distance to properly process the loss. She had no one. Except she did have someone. The memory surfaced suddenly, the letter from Helena's attorney that had arrived 6 weeks ago, thick and official-looking, marked time-sensitive estate matters. Carrie had set it aside, meaning to open it when she had emotional energy to deal with whatever final affairs her grandmother had left behind. I said no, Carrie repeated, moving toward the door with as much dignity as her pregnant waddle would allow. Have your attorney contact me properly. Not through ambushes at family dinners. Caroline. Patricia Whitmore stood, her voice carrying the authority of old money and social position. Perhaps you should reconsider. Marcus is being very generous under the circumstances. Under what circumstances? Carrie turned back. The circumstances where your son cheated on his pregnant wife? The circumstances where he stole our joint savings? The circumstances where he humiliated me in front of all of you while his mistress smiled? Don't call me that. Sienna's voice turned sharp. I'm not the mistress. You're the obstacle. Marcus and I are in love, and you're just too stubborn to accept that your marriage is over. Carrie looked at Sienna, really looked at her for the first time. Took in the expensive dress, the confidence, the hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach. Something about that gesture triggered another memory, Sienna's parents, whom she'd mentioned frequently in the 2 social events where Carrie had been forced to endure her presence. Robert and Diana Hart. Sienna had bragged about them constantly. Her father was a senior vice president at Riverside Bank. Her mother headed the wealth management division. They'd worked there for over 20 years, climbing the corporate ladder together, building impressive careers in regional banking. The same regional bank where Carrie had worked for 5 years as a loan officer. The same bank that was part of Bancroft Holdings. The same Bancroft Holdings that her grandmother Helena had built from a single community bank into a 47-location empire worth billions. Carrie felt something shift in her chest, a cold clarity cutting through the humiliation and pain. Enjoy your evening, she said softly, meeting Marcus's eyes. All of you. Enjoy it very much. Something in her tone made Marcus frown. What's that supposed to mean? It means that actions have consequences. Carrie moved to the door, her hand on the frame for support. And sometimes those consequences take a while to arrive. But when they do, she looked at Sienna, at Marcus, at the Whitmore family watching with various expressions of discomfort and satisfaction. They're absolutely devastating. She left before anyone could respond, walking through the grand foyer of the Whitmore estate with her head high despite the wine staining her dress and the tears burning behind her eyes. Marcus called after her, something about getting the papers signed, about being reasonable, but Carrie didn't stop. She made it to her 10-year-old Honda in the circular driveway, made it inside and locked the doors, made it 3 blocks away before she had to pull over because her hands were shaking too badly to drive. For 10 minutes, she sat in a grocery store parking lot, crying while her daughter kicked and moved inside her. The physical discomfort of late pregnancy mixed with emotional devastation until Carrie couldn't separate one pain from another. But underneath the tears, underneath the humiliation and betrayal, something else was growing. Something cold and hard and absolutely certain. She drove home to the small apartment she'd insisted on keeping when Marcus wanted her to move into his house full-time. He'd called it stubborn and ridiculous, but Carrie had valued having her own space. Now she was grateful for the foresight. The apartment was tiny, a 1-bedroom in an older building that needed updating but had good light and reasonable rent. Carrie had furnished it simply over the years, creating a peaceful retreat from Marcus's increasingly demanding presence. The letter from Helena's attorney sat on her kitchen counter where she'd left it 6 weeks ago. Thick cream envelope, expensive paper, return address for Morrison and Associates, attorneys at law. Carrie made herself chamomile tea, changed into comfortable pajamas, and sat down at her small kitchen table. Her hand still shook slightly as she opened the envelope, breaking the wax seal that seemed unnecessarily formal for estate paperwork. Inside were 3 documents. The first was a letter in her grandmother's handwriting. My dearest Caroline, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if the timing is what I suspect, you're also pregnant and probably dealing with more than you should have to handle alone. I've known about Marcus for longer than you realize. Known what kind of man he is. Known that eventually he would show his true colors. I hoped I was wrong. But Bancroft women don't build empires by ignoring patterns. Carrie's breath caught. She read on, her grandmother's elegant script revealing truths she hadn't expected. You left our family 5 years ago because you wanted a normal life. You wanted to be Caroline the loan officer, not Caroline Bancroft, heiress to a banking fortune. I respected that choice, even when it broke my heart. But I never stopped protecting you, darling girl. I never stopped preparing for the day when you'd need what I built. Bancroft Holdings now controls 47 regional banks across 8 states, with combined assets of $4.2 billion. It's all yours, Caroline. Every bank, every dollar, every ounce of power I spent 40 years accumulating. And here's the beautiful part, Marcus has no idea. His mistress has no idea. Her parents, Robert and Diana Hart, who work at Riverside Bank, your bank now, have no idea. Take your time. Heal. Have your baby. Then, when you're ready, show them all exactly what a Bancroft woman is capable of. All my love, Grandmother Helena. Carrie read the letter 3 times before setting it down with trembling hands. The second document was a formal estate notice confirming that Helena Bancroft had passed away 4 months ago and that Caroline Margaret Whitmore, née Bancroft, was the sole beneficiary of her estate. The third document was a phone number for Morrison and Associates, with a handwritten note, call when ready. We've been waiting. Carrie sat in her small kitchen, wine-stained and 8 months pregnant and utterly alone, holding papers that made her one of the wealthiest women in the state. Marcus thought he'd discarded a powerless loan officer with no resources and no options. He had no idea he'd just declared war on the woman who now owned the bank where his mistress's parents built their entire careers. Carrie placed her hand on her belly, feeling her daughter's strong kicks, and smiled for the first time since the wine had hit her face. Your great-grandmother, she whispered to the baby, was a very, very smart woman. And she just gave us everything we need to make sure your father regrets every choice he made tonight. Outside her window, the city lights of Riverside glowed against the darkness. Somewhere out there, Marcus and Sienna were probably celebrating, thinking they'd won, thinking they'd successfully disposed of an obstacle to their happiness. Let them celebrate, Carrie thought. Let them plan their wedding and their future and their perfect life together. Because in a few weeks, after her daughter was born, after she'd had time to heal and strategize and prepare, Caroline Bancroft was going to remind them all of something very important. never underestimate a woman with nothing left to lose and billions of dollars to prove it. Carrie woke the next morning to her daughter doing gymnastics against her ribs. For a blessed moment, she forgot everything, the wine-soaked humiliation, Marcus's cruelty, Sienna's triumphant smile. Then reality crashed back, and she pressed her face into the pillow to muffle a sob she refused to let fully emerge. She couldn't afford to fall apart. Not now. The clock read 6:47 a.m. Monday morning. Marcus would already be at the dealership, selling luxury cars to people with more money than sense. The irony wasn't lost on Carrie. Her husband made a living convincing people they needed things they couldn't afford, and he'd convinced himself he needed a younger woman to feel alive. Her phone showed 17 missed calls. 12 from Marcus, 3 from Patricia Whitmore, 2 from Jessica. The voicemails ranged from Marcus demanding she stop being dramatic and sign the papers to Patricia's carefully modulated concern about handling this situation with grace and dignity. Grace and dignity. As if Carrie had been the one to pour wine on someone at a family dinner. She deleted them all without listening to the full messages. The letter from her grandmother sat on the nightstand where Carrie had placed it before finally falling asleep at 2 a.m. In the morning light, the cream-colored paper seemed to glow with possibility. Or maybe that was just exhaustion playing tricks on her eyes. Call when ready, the note had said. We've been waiting. Carrie picked up her phone and dialed before she could second-guess herself. The receptionist answered on the second ring. Morrison and Associates, how may I direct your call? This is Caroline Whitmore. Caroline Bancroft, she corrected herself, the name feeling strange after 5 years of disuse. I'm calling about Helena Bancroft's estate. The pause that followed lasted only a heartbeat, but Carrie heard something shift in the receptionist's voice. Ms. Bancroft, we've been expecting your call. Let me connect you directly to Mr. Morrison. Within seconds, a warm baritone filled the line. Caroline, my dear girl. I'm so glad you finally called. I'm Thomas Morrison. I was your grandmother's attorney for 32 years, and I've been hoping to hear from you for months now. I'm sorry, Carrie said automatically. I received the letter, but with the pregnancy and everything happening with my husband, you have nothing to apologize for. Helena specifically instructed that we not pressure you, that you'd call when the time was right. His voice gentled. I take it the time is right? Carrie looked down at the wine-stained dress she'd left draped over her bathroom sink, at the divorce papers Marcus had texted her copies of at 11 p.m. last night, at her swollen belly where her daughter was running out of room but still making her presence enthusiastically known. My husband served me with divorce papers last night at his family's dinner. In front of everyone. After pouring wine on me and announcing his mistress is pregnant. I see. Thomas Morrison's tone shifted from warm to something much colder. Then yes, I'd say the time is definitely right. How soon can you come to our office? I'm 8 months pregnant. Very 8 months. Then I'll come to you. Are you at the apartment on Riverside Drive? The fact that he knew her address without asking should have been alarming. Instead, Carrie felt oddly comforted. Her grandmother had planned for this. Had prepared people to help her when she needed it most. Yes. But Mr. Morrison, I need to know, is it real? The letter said $4. $2 billion in assets. That can't be right. It's very real, Caroline. And I have a great deal to explain to you about what your grandmother built and why she kept it hidden for so long. He paused. I can be there in 45 minutes. Is that acceptable? Yes. Thank you. After hanging up, Carrie stood under the shower for 20 minutes, letting hot water wash away the wine residue from her hair and the exhaustion from her bones. Her daughter seemed to sense the shift in her mother's emotional state, settling down from her morning acrobatics into gentle movements. We're going to be okay, Carrie whispered, her hands on her belly. Your great-grandmother made sure of that. We're going to be more than okay. She dressed in the most professional maternity outfit she owned, black pants that stretched over her bump and a navy blouse that at least looked intentional rather than desperate. The face looking back at her from the mirror showed shadows under her eyes and a tightness around her mouth that hadn't been there 6 months ago. 5 years of marriage had aged her in ways that went beyond the number. She could see it now, looking at herself with new clarity. The way she'd slowly diminished herself to make Marcus comfortable. The way she'd apologized for being tired during pregnancy, for gaining weight, for not being exciting enough. The way she'd forgotten she was a Bancroft. Thomas Morrison arrived exactly 45 minutes later, carrying a leather briefcase that looked expensive and well-used. He was in his early 60s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to assess everything in seconds. But his smile was genuinely warm when Carrie opened the door. "You look just like her," he said softly. "Helena at 32. Same eyes, same stubborn chin. People always said that." Carrie gestured him inside, suddenly self-conscious about her tiny apartment. "I'm sorry, I don't have much space, this is perfect." Thomas settled onto her small couch with the ease of someone comfortable anywhere. "And Caroline, before we begin discussing your grandmother's estate, I need you to understand something important." "What?" "Helena loved you more than anything in this world. Every decision she made, every dollar she accumulated, every strategic move she planned, it was all for you. To protect you. To give you options when you needed them most." Carrie felt tears threaten and blinked them back. "She died 4 months ago, and I didn't even know. I was so wrapped up in my pregnancy and Marcus's mood swings that I didn't check my mail properly. I missed her funeral." "You didn't miss it." Thomas opened his briefcase and pulled out a photograph. Helena specifically requested a private burial with no announcements, no obituaries, no public mourning. She said the only person who mattered couldn't be there, and she didn't want anyone else's grief cluttering up her goodbye. The photograph showed Helena's gravestone, elegant and simple, Helena Margaret Bancroft, 1943 to 2024. Beloved grandmother. Builder of legacies. She knew I was pregnant. She knew everything, Caroline. She had private investigators keeping tabs on you from the moment you married Marcus Whitmore. Thomas pulled out a thick folder. She knew about his affair with Sienna Hart. She knew about his financial struggles at the dealership. She knew about his parents' mounting debt and their pressure on him to marry someone with connections or money. Carrie's mind reeled. His parents are in debt. But the estate, the lifestyle, all mortgaged to the hilt. Richard Whitmore made some spectacularly bad investments in 2020, and the family has been hemorrhaging money ever since. Thomas opened the folder, revealing financial documents. They were counting on Marcus to marry well. Someone from an established family with resources. When you showed up as a simple loan officer with no apparent connections, they were disappointed. They never said anything. Of course not. They hoped Marcus would eventually trade up. And when Sienna Hart came along, daughter of 2 senior executives at a major regional bank, they encouraged the affair actively. The pieces clicked into place. Patricia's coolness toward Carrie over the years. Richard's constant suggestions that Marcus network more effectively. Jessica's comments about how Marcus deserved someone more ambitious. They'd been pushing him towards someone like Sienna all along. Someone whose family connections could solve their financial problems. "They have no idea who I really am," Carrie said slowly. "None whatsoever. To them, you're exactly what you appeared to be, a woman with no family money, no social connections, no resources beyond a modest salary." Thomas smiled. "Your grandmother was very careful to maintain your cover. She's been paying you through a subsidiary of Bancroft Holdings for 5 years, making it look like a normal bank salary rather than what it actually was." "What was it actually?" "An allowance that let you maintain independence while she tested Marcus. To see if he'd love you without knowing about the money. To see if he was worthy of joining the Bancroft family. He failed that test spectacularly." "He did indeed." Thomas pulled out another document. "Which brings us to what happens next. Helena's estate consists of several components, but the primary asset is Bancroft Holdings, a privately held corporation that owns 47 regional banks across 8 states. He spread financial statements across Carrie's coffee table. The numbers were staggering. Assets in the billions. Annual profits that exceeded what Carrie had imagined possible. How did she build this without anyone knowing? By being brilliant and patient. Helena started with a single community bank she inherited from her father in 1973. While everyone else was consolidating into massive national chains, she quietly bought struggling regional banks and turned them profitable. She used shell companies, trusts, and a network of legal structures that kept the Bancroft name invisible. Thomas pointed to one of the documents. Riverside Bank, where you've been working, that was her first major acquisition in 1989. She's owned it for 35 years. The Hart family has been working for your grandmother's company for their entire careers and had no idea. Carrie thought about Robert and Diana Hart. The way they'd looked at her at the two awkward social events where they'd all been forced together. The subtle condescension when they learned she was just a loan officer rather than management. The way they'd encouraged Sienna's relationship with Marcus, probably seeing it as a good match between their ambitious daughter and a successful businessman. Do they know yet? About my grandmother's death? About me inheriting? Not yet. The estate has been in probate, and we've kept it extremely quiet. There were some complexities with the trust structures that needed resolving before we could transfer everything to you. Thomas pulled out a new set of documents. But as of this morning, pending your signature on these papers, you are the sole owner of Bancroft Holdings and all its assets. Carrie stared at the papers. They represented more than money. They represented power, the kind of power that could destroy careers, end marriages, and reshape lives with a single decision. What about Marcus? The divorce? Does he have any claim to this? Absolutely none. The inheritance is entirely separate from marital property. And since you kept your apartment, kept your own bank account, and maintained financial independence, there's very little marital property to divide. Thomas's smile turned sharp. In fact, given that Marcus stole from your joint account to fund his wedding to his mistress, you have grounds to sue him for conversion of assets. I don't want to sue him. I don't want his money. Understood. But Caroline, you need to think strategically about how you want to handle this situation. Your grandmother left very specific instructions about various scenarios. What kind of scenarios? Thomas pulled out yet another folder, this one marked Justice Protocols in Helena's handwriting. Inside were detailed plans for different situations: if Marcus left her, if his family tried to claim Bancroft assets, if Sienna's parents discovered the truth, if any of them attempted to manipulate or control Carrie. Your grandmother, Thomas said with obvious admiration, planned for everything. She has strategies outlined for quiet resolutions, public exposures, corporate restructuring, and what she called maximum impact revelations. Carrie flipped through the pages, seeing her grandmother's neat handwriting outlining step-by-step approaches to each scenario. It was like reading a general's battle plans, except the battlefield was corporate America and the weapons were financial leverage and strategic information control. She really thought of everything. Helena Bancroft didn't build a billion-dollar empire by leaving things to chance. Thomas leaned forward. Now, the question is, what do you want to do? How do you want to handle Marcus, Sienna, and everyone who underestimated you? Carrie was quiet for a long moment, her hands resting on her belly. Her daughter had settled into a comfortable position, occasionally stretching an elbow or knee against the constraint of Carrie's womb. I want them to know, she said finally. I want Marcus to understand exactly who he married and what he threw away. I want Sienna to realize her parents work for me. I want the Whitmore family to see what happens when you treat people as disposable. Revenge, then. Justice. Carrie met Thomas's eyes. My grandmother called it justice protocols. There's a difference between revenge and making sure people face appropriate consequences for their choices. Thomas smiled with deep satisfaction. Helena said you'd make that distinction. She was very proud of your ethics, you know. Even when she disagreed with your choices, she admired your principles. What would she want me to do? She'd want you to be strategic. To wait until your daughter is born and you've recovered physically. To gather all the information you need. To position yourself perfectly. Thomas began collecting the documents. And then to deliver consequences with such precision that no one ever underestimates a Bancroft woman again. Carrie thought about the wine dripping down her face, about Marcus's casual cruelty, about Sienna's triumphant smile. She thought about the joint savings stolen to fund their wedding, about being called an obstacle to their happiness, about being told she brought nothing to the marriage. How long do we have before this becomes public knowledge? As long as you want. The estate settlement can be handled quietly. You can maintain your current lifestyle, your apartment, your apparent financial situation. No one needs to know anything has changed until you decide to reveal it. And Riverside Bank? The Harts? They'll continue working exactly as they have been, with no idea their ultimate boss is the woman their daughter is helping to destroy. Thomas's expression turned calculating. Of course, once you take active control of Bancroft Holdings, you'll need to review all senior management positions. Standard protocol when new ownership assumes control. The implication was clear. Carrie would have the power to fire Robert and Diana Hart, to destroy the careers they'd spent decades building, to strip away the foundation of Sienna's confident superiority. I don't want to be cruel, Carrie said carefully. I don't want to hurt people just because I can. No one is suggesting cruelty. But accountability, that's different. If people have performed their jobs well, they keep their positions. If they've been neglectful, unethical, or have conflicts of interest. Thomas trailed off meaningfully. Well, that requires investigation. Carrie understood. A thorough review of the Harts' performance, their decision-making, their management of bank resources, it would all be standard practice. If they'd done everything properly, they had nothing to fear. But if there were any questionable choices, any ethical lapses, any hint of impropriety. When can I officially take control? Sign these papers today, and you're the legal owner by end of business tomorrow. Helena set up a transition team, people she trusted who've been running Bancroft Holdings since her death, waiting for you to step in. They're ready to brief you whenever you're ready. After the baby comes. I need a few weeks to be a mother first. Of course. Thomas stood, gathering his briefcase. But Caroline, there's one more thing you need to know. What? Marcus and Sienna have set their engagement party for 3 weeks from Saturday. A lavish affair at the Riverside Country Club. They've invited over 200 people, basically announcing to the entire city that Marcus has upgraded from his boring pregnant wife to a young, exciting socialite. Carrie felt her jaw clench. That's barely a week after my due date. Yes. Helena's notes suggest that Marcus chose the timing deliberately. He wants you either still in the hospital or home with a newborn, unable to make any kind of appearance or statement. He's trying to control the narrative completely. And Sienna? Is planning to announce her pregnancy at the party. She's got the whole thing orchestrated, the perfect dress, the big reveal, the celebration of their new life together. Thomas pulled out one final document. Here's the guest list. Notice anyone interesting? Carrie scanned the names. Robert and Diana Hart. The Whitmore family. Marcus's business associates. Sienna's society friends. And buried in the middle, several board members from Riverside Bank's executive committee. People who worked for Carrie's company and had no idea. They're using my bank's executives for their social climbing, she said slowly. They are indeed. The Harts have been leveraging their positions at Riverside Bank for years to build Sienna's social connections. It's not technically unethical, but it's certainly strategic. Carrie looked at the engagement party details. The venue, the caterer, the band, everything expensive and designed to showcase Marcus and Sienna as a power couple on the rise. What if, she said carefully, what if I wanted to attend this party? Thomas's smile was razor sharp. Then I would say that's an excellent idea. And I would recommend we spend the next few weeks preparing you for the most memorable entrance the Riverside Country Club has ever witnessed. I'll be barely a week postpartum. Which will make it even more powerful. The wife he discarded, showing up after giving birth to his child, while he celebrates with his mistress. Thomas headed toward the door. Think about it, Caroline. Your grandmother's justice protocols include a scenario she called maximum public exposure with corporate leverage. It's designed for exactly this type of situation. After he left, Carrie sat surrounded by documents that proved she was worth more than Marcus could dream of. She thought about her grandmother, planning for years to protect her. Building an empire in secret, maintaining Carrie's cover, preparing for the day when the mask would need to come off. Her phone buzzed. Marcus, texting, need those papers signed by Friday. Stop dragging this out. Carrie looked at the message, at the demand for her compliance, at his absolute certainty that he held all the power in this situation. She typed back, take all the time you need to plan your engagement party. I'll be in touch after the baby comes. His response was immediate, good. At least you're being reasonable about something. Carrie smiled, placing her phone face down on the table. She pulled out the calendar and counted days. Her due date was September 15th. The engagement party was September 23rd. If everything went on schedule, she'd have 8 days to recover from childbirth and prepare to crash the party that was supposed to celebrate her erasure. 8 days to transform from discarded wife to corporate dynasty heir. 8 days to gather evidence, position her pieces, and prepare to show Marcus Whitmore the biggest mistake of his life. Her daughter kicked hard, as if in agreement with the plan. Your great-grandmother was right, Carrie whispered to her belly. Timing is everything. And ours is about to be perfect. Outside her window, Riverside stretched in all directions, a city built on banking and industry and the kind of old money that ran quiet and deep. Somewhere in that city, Marcus was probably telling Sienna how well the divorce was going, how cooperative Carrie was being, how easy this was all turning out. Let him think that. Let them both think they'd won. Because in 3 weeks, Caroline Bancroft was going to walk into that engagement party and remind everyone that underestimating quiet women was always a catastrophic mistake. Especially when the quiet woman owned the bank where your entire social status was built. The Bancroft Holdings headquarters occupied the top 3 floors of the Riverside Financial Tower, a building Carrie had walked past hundreds of times without realizing her grandmother owned it. She stood in the marble lobby at 9 a.m. on Tuesday morning, 3 days after Thomas Morrison's visit, feeling her daughter's weight pressing low in her pelvis. 34 weeks and 2 days pregnant. The doctor had said she was measuring large, that the baby might come early. Carrie hoped for at least another 3 weeks, time to recover before the engagement party that was now circled in red on her calendar. Ms. Bancroft. A woman in her 50s approached, wearing a navy suit that screamed executive authority. I'm Margaret Chen, Chief Operating Officer of Bancroft Holdings. Your grandmother and I worked together for 28 years. Carrie shook her hand, noting the firm grip and assessing eyes. Thank you for meeting with me. I know this transition has been delayed. Your grandmother specifically instructed us to give you space and time. She was very clear that you'd come to us when you were ready, not when we demanded it. Margaret gestured toward the elevators. Shall we? The team is assembled in the executive conference room. The elevator rose silently, and Carrie caught her reflection in the polished steel doors. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, a charcoal maternity dress that looked professional despite accommodating her swollen belly, low heels she could actually walk in, minimal jewelry. She looked like a pregnant woman trying to appear competent, not like someone about to inherit billions. Perfect. The conference room took up half of the 42nd floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of downtown Riverside and the river beyond. 6 people stood as Carrie entered, their faces mixing curiosity with carefully controlled professionalism. Everyone, Margaret said, this is Caroline Bancroft, Helena's granddaughter and the new owner of Bancroft Holdings. The introductions blurred together. James Wu, Chief Financial Officer. Patricia Valdez, General Counsel. David Kim, Head of Acquisitions. Sarah Mitchell, VP of Operations. And finally, Robert Chen, Margaret's husband and the company's head of risk management. We've prepared comprehensive briefings on all 47 bank locations, Margaret said, distributing leather folders around the table. But first, Caroline, I think you should know what your grandmother built and why she kept it hidden for so long. Carrie settled carefully into the chair at the head of the table, her grandmother's chair, she realized with a jolt. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, and she placed a hand on her belly, drawing strength from the movement. Please. Tell me everything. For the next hour, they walked her through the empire. Helena had started with Riverside Community Bank in 1973, inheriting it from her father. While other banks consolidated into national chains, Helena had seen opportunity in regional banking, the personal relationships, the local knowledge, the community connections that big banks couldn't replicate. She'd bought her second bank in 1981, a failing institution in a neighboring county. Then 3 more in 1985. By 1990, she'd developed a system, identify struggling regional banks, purchase them quietly through shell companies, install excellent management, and turn them profitable within 2 years. Your grandmother never wanted to be famous, Patricia Valdez explained. She watched what happened to high-profile women in business, the scrutiny, the attacks, the assumption that they'd inherited everything rather than building it themselves. So she stayed invisible. She used 17 different corporate entities, James Wu added, pulling up an organizational chart that looked like a spider web. All legally structured, all properly taxed, but virtually impossible to trace back to a single owner unless you knew what to look for. Carrie studied the chart, seeing the genius in her grandmother's approach. In Riverside Bank, where I've been working, that's the original. The flagship, Margaret confirmed. Also the largest, with assets of $2.1 billion in 12 branch locations across 3 counties. Your grandmother was very particular about Riverside. She considered it the foundation of everything else. Tell me about the senior management there. Margaret and Robert exchanged glances. Is there something specific you'd like to know? Robert and Diana Hart. Senior Vice President and Wealth Management Director, respectively. I understand they've been with the bank for over 20 years. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Sarah Mitchell cleared her throat. You know about the Harts. I know their daughter is engaged to my husband. My soon-to-be ex-husband. Carrie kept her voice level. I'd like to understand their positions, their performance, and whether there are any conflicts of interest we should be concerned about. Robert Chin opened his laptop, pulling up personnel files. Robert Hart joined Riverside Bank in 2001 as a commercial lending officer. He's been promoted steadily, perhaps more steadily than his performance warranted. Diana Hart came in 2003, initially in retail banking, moved to wealth management in 2008. Performance issues? Carrie asked. Not catastrophic, but concerning. Robert approved several loans in the past 3 years that showed questionable judgment. Diana's wealth management division has the highest client complaint rate of any Bancroft Holdings location. Robert pulled up graphs showing performance metrics. Your grandmother was planning to address these issues before she passed away. Were they aware of her concerns? No. Helena believed in gathering complete evidence before confronting problems. She'd been documenting everything for about 6 months. Carrie felt something cold settle in her chest. Her grandmother had known about the Hart's performance issues. Had been building a case against them. And then she died, leaving the documentation for Carrie to discover. Leaving Carrie the power to use it. I'd like full reports on both of them, she said quietly. Every loan Robert approved in the past 3 years. Every client complaint Diana's division received. Every performance review, every disciplinary note, every single piece of documentation we have. May I ask why? Patricia Valdez's tone was carefully neutral. Because their daughter is marrying my husband 3 weeks from now. And I need to know if there are any ethical considerations I should be aware of before that happens. The room fell silent. Finally, Margaret spoke, her voice gentle but firm. Caroline, your grandmother left very specific instructions about situations like this. She called them justice protocols. Thomas Morrison mentioned those. Did he mention that Helena spent 2 years investigating the Harts after learning about Sienna's relationship with your husband? Margaret pulled out another folder, this one marked with Helena's familiar handwriting. She knew about the affair almost from the beginning. She had private investigators documenting everything. Carrie's hands tightened on the arms of her chair. Everything? Every hotel meeting. Every text message they could legally access. Every financial transaction. Margaret opened the folder, revealing photographs, bank statements, phone records. She even discovered something about Sienna's pregnancy that you should probably know. What about it? It's fake. The words hung in the air like a bomb. Carrie stared at Margaret, certain she'd misheard. What? Sienna Hart is not pregnant. Never has been. Margaret spread out medical records that Carrie couldn't begin to imagine how they'd obtained. She purchased a fake ultrasound online, created a narrative about being 12 weeks along, and has been maintaining the fiction for the past month. How do you know this? Because your grandmother's investigators have been following her for 8 months. They documented her drinking alcohol at multiple social events in the past 3 weeks. They have footage of her at a gym doing high-intensity workouts that no pregnant woman in her first trimester would be cleared for. And they have access to her medical records, legally obtained through a private investigator who specializes in this kind of thing, showing no prenatal care whatsoever. Carrie felt the world tilt. Marcus doesn't know. Marcus has no idea. Sienna has been very careful. The fake ultrasound, the morning sickness claims, the strategic hand-on-stomach gestures, it's all performance. Margaret's expression was ice. She's using the pregnancy to lock him in, probably planning to fake a miscarriage after the wedding. Or, Robert Chin added darkly, actually get pregnant and claim the timing was just off. Either way, she's manipulating your husband with a non-existent baby. Carrie thought about the engagement party, about Sienna's planned announcement of her pregnancy to 200 guests. The humiliation when the truth eventually emerged would be spectacular. Does she know we know? No one knows except the people in this room and Thomas Morrison. Margaret leaned forward. Caroline, what do you want to do with this information? What did she want to do? Expose Sienna immediately and prove she was a liar? Wait and let the fake pregnancy blow up Marcus's life on its own timeline? Use it as leverage during the divorce proceedings? Or save it for maximum impact? I want to wait, Carrie said finally. Let them plan their engagement party. Let Sienna announce her pregnancy to everyone. And then, she paused, feeling her own very real baby shift inside her, then we'll see what happens when the truth comes out. Your grandmother would approve of that approach, Margaret said with satisfaction. Strategic patience. Let your enemies commit fully before revealing you've been 3 steps ahead the entire time. They spent another hour reviewing financial details, organizational structures, and the various subsidiaries that made up Bancroft Holdings. By the time they finished, Carrie's head was swimming with information and her back was aching from sitting too long. One more thing, she said as they prepared to leave. I don't want any of this made public yet. As far as the world knows, I'm still just Caroline Whitmore, struggling loan officer going through a difficult divorce. Understood. The estate settlement is still technically in progress, we can maintain that fiction as long as you need. Patricia Valdez made notes. Though eventually you'll need to take an active role in company management. After the baby comes. After I've had time to recover and prepare. Carrie stood carefully, one hand on her lower back. For now, I'm just a pregnant woman whose husband left her for a younger woman. Let everyone keep believing that. Margaret walked her to the elevator, her expression thoughtful. Your grandmother used to say that being underestimated was the greatest advantage a woman could have in business. People make mistakes when they think you're powerless. She was right. She also said that timing was everything. That the difference between revenge and justice was knowing exactly when to act. Margaret pressed the elevator button. Your husband chose his engagement party date very deliberately, barely a week after your due date, assuming you'd be too overwhelmed with a newborn to interfere. He's going to regret that assumption. The elevator arrived, and Carrie stepped inside. As the doors began to close, Margaret called out, "Caroline? Your grandmother was very proud of you, you know. Even when you walked away from all this, she was proud. She said it took strength to choose your own path, even if she disagreed with it." The doors closed before Carrie could respond, but tears burned her eyes as the elevator descended. Her grandmother had loved her enough to let her go, to let her try to build a normal life, and to prepare everything for the moment when that normal life inevitably fell apart. Because Helena Bancroft had known what Carrie was only now learning, there was no such thing as normal for women like them. There was only power, and what you chose to do with it. Carrie's OBGYN appointment that afternoon confirmed what she'd been suspecting: the baby was coming soon. "You're already 2 centimeters. Dilated," Dr. Sandra Kim said, checking her chart. "And the baby's dropped significantly. I'd say you're looking at delivery within the next 2 weeks, possibly sooner. My due date is still 3 weeks away." "Due dates are estimates, Caroline. Your body is telling us this baby is ready to arrive." Dr. Kim smiled reassuringly. "Everything looks healthy. The baby's in perfect position. Your blood pressure is good. There's no reason to be concerned about an early delivery at this point." Carrie thought about the engagement party, about her carefully calculated timeline. If the baby came in the next 2 weeks, she'd have barely any recovery time before Marcus and Sienna's big celebration. Perfect. "What about attending a social event a week postpartum?" she asked carefully. Dr. Kim raised an eyebrow. "I wouldn't recommend it. You'll be exhausted, bleeding, dealing with hormonal shifts and probably sleep deprivation. Why would you want to go to a social event?" "My husband's engagement party. To the woman he left me for while I was pregnant." The silence that followed was profound. Finally, Dr. Kim said, "I see. Well, medically speaking, if you're determined to attend, I can't stop you. Just know that you'll be uncomfortable, you'll need to dress carefully to accommodate postpartum bleeding, and you'll probably want to leave after an hour at most. An hour should be plenty of time." After the appointment, Carrie sat in her car in the medical building parking lot, calculating timelines and possibilities. Her phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. "Sienna wants to know if you'll be moved out of the apartment by the end of the month. She's looking at places for us and wants to know what's available." Carrie stared at the message, incredulous. The apartment was hers, she'd rented it before they married, kept it in her name only, paid the rent from her separate account. Marcus had no claim to it whatsoever. She typed back, "The apartment is mine. Sienna can look anywhere she wants, but not here." His response came immediately, "Don't be difficult about this. You'll need to downsize anyway once you're a single mother. May as well start planning now." The casual cruelty was breathtaking. He was already planning her diminished future, already imagining her struggling in a smaller place while he and Sienna enjoyed their upgraded life. Carrie deleted the conversation and opened her email. Thomas Morrison had sent over the first batch of reports on the Hart's performance at Riverside Bank. She skimmed through them, noting the patterns Margaret had mentioned. Robert Hart had approved a series of commercial loans to businesses owned by friends and family members of board members, not technically against policy, but ethically questionable. Several had defaulted, costing the bank significant money. Diana Hart's wealth management division had the highest turnover rate among financial advisors of any Bancroft Holdings location. Client complaints cited aggressive sales tactics, inappropriate investment recommendations, and a general feeling of being pressured rather than advised. Neither issue was severe enough to warrant immediate termination. But together, they painted a picture of 2 executives who prioritized personal relationships and advancement over sound business practices. Carrie forwarded the reports to Thomas Morrison with a simple note, "Can we legally use any of this?" His response came within minutes, "In a divorce proceeding?" "No." "In a corporate restructuring after new ownership takes control?" "Absolutely. This is exactly the kind of performance documentation that justifies management changes." She sat in her car, one hand on her belly where her daughter was doing slow rolls, and thought about justice versus revenge. Revenge would be firing the Harts immediately, destroying their careers out of spite because their daughter was marrying Carrie's husband. Justice would be conducting a thorough performance review after taking control of the company, discovering legitimate concerns about their management, and making business decisions based on documented evidence. The fact that those business decisions would devastate Sienna's family right as she was planning her triumphant social debut, well, that was just excellent timing. Carrie's phone rang. Rebecca Hayes, her best friend from college and the only person besides Thomas Morrison who knew the full truth about her inheritance. "Tell me you're not still sitting in that parking lot overthinking everything," Rebecca said without preamble. "How did you know I'm in a parking lot?" "Because I know you. You just had your OB appointment, and now you're processing information and planning 17 steps ahead like the secret corporate mastermind you apparently are." Rebecca's voice was warm with affection and exasperation. "Have you eaten today?" "I had toast for breakfast." "That was 8 hours ago. Meet me at Riverside Cafe in 20 minutes. We need to discuss your plan for this engagement party, and you need to eat actual food before that baby decides to arrive early and ruin your perfectly calculated timeline." "The baby isn't going to ruin anything. The baby is going to do whatever the baby wants, which is what babies do." 20 minutes, Carrie. "Don't make me come find you." The cafe was crowded with the lunch rush, but Rebecca had claimed a corner booth that offered both privacy and a good view of the door. She stood as Carrie approached, her expression shifting from worry to assessment. "You look exhausted." "I'm 8 months pregnant and planning corporate warfare against my cheating husband. Exhausted is my natural state." Carrie slid into the booth with a grateful sigh. "But I found out something interesting today. More interesting than inheriting $4 billion? Sienna's pregnancy is fake." Rebecca's water glass stopped halfway to her mouth. "What?" Carrie explained what Margaret had told her, watching Rebecca's expression shift from shock to fury to calculating satisfaction. That manipulative little, Rebecca caught herself, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. So she's been lying to Marcus this entire time. Using a fake pregnancy to lock him into the relationship. Apparently planning to either actually get pregnant or fake a miscarriage after the wedding. And Marcus has no idea. None whatsoever. He's planning an engagement party where Sienna will announce her fake pregnancy to 200 people, including her parents, his family, and half of Riverside's social elite. Rebecca was quiet for a moment, her mind clearly working through possibilities. "When were you planning to expose this?" "I wasn't planning to expose it at all. At least not directly." Carrie accepted a menu from the waitress, ordered the pregnancy-safe special without looking. "I thought I'd let the situation resolve itself naturally." "Naturally meaning what, exactly?" "Naturally meaning that eventually someone will notice she's not actually pregnant. Eventually the timeline won't add up. Eventually Marcus will figure out he's been manipulated." Carrie smiled without humor. "And I'll be far away from the explosion when it happens." "That's very mature of you. My grandmother's justice protocols emphasize letting people destroy themselves rather than actively destroying them. It's more effective and legally safer." Rebecca leaned forward. "Okay, but speaking as your best friend who watched Marcus pour wine on you and humiliate you in front of his family, don't you want to see his face when he realizes he threw away his marriage for a woman who's been lying to him from day one?" "Of course I do. But I want it to happen in a way that can't be traced back to me." Carrie placed her hands on her belly, feeling her daughter's movements. "The engagement party is in 3 weeks. If the baby comes on time or slightly early, I'll be about a week postpartum. Exhausted, hormonal, physically recovering from childbirth. Not exactly in a position to crash a party and deliver devastating revelations." "Exactly. Which means if anything dramatic happens at that party, no one could possibly blame me. I'll be home with a newborn, completely removed from whatever consequences unfold." Rebecca's smile grew slowly. "You've really thought this through." "I've had help. My grandmother left detailed protocols for situations exactly like this. Carrie pulled out her phone, showing Rebecca the files Thomas had sent over. She planned for betrayal, divorce, corporate sabotage, and what she called social warfare. All of it designed to maintain plausible deniability while ensuring justice gets served. Your grandmother was devious. My grandmother built a $4 billion empire in complete secrecy while letting everyone think she was a simple banker. Devious doesn't begin to cover it. The food arrived, and Carrie ate mechanically, fueling her body while her mind raced through scenarios and timelines. The baby was coming soon. She could feel it in the increasing pressure, the way her body was preparing for the massive task ahead. 2 weeks, Dr. Kim had said. Possibly sooner. Which meant Carrie needed to prepare for the possibility of going into labor at any moment while simultaneously setting up the pieces for the engagement party confrontation. I need to ask you something, she said to Rebecca. And you can say no. What? If I go into labor and the timing works out, if I deliver early enough to have recovered enough to attend the engagement party, would you come with me? Rebecca didn't hesitate. Absolutely. I wouldn't miss it for anything. It might get ugly. Confrontational. There could be scenes. Carrie, your husband poured wine on your face while you were 8 months pregnant. His mistress is faking a pregnancy to trap him. And you're about to reveal that you own the bank where her parents have built their entire careers. Rebecca's smile was fierce. I've been waiting my entire friendship with you to see the Bancroft side of your personality emerge. There's no way I'm missing the show. They spent another hour planning logistics, discussing wardrobe options for a week postpartum appearance, and strategizing about how to position Carrie's attendance at the party as either sympathetic, poor abandoned wife showing grace under pressure, or powerful, divorced woman moving on with her life, depending on what played better. By the time Carrie returned to her apartment, she felt prepared. As prepared as anyone could be while waiting to give birth and planning to expose multiple layers of betrayal at a social event she wasn't technically invited to. Her phone showed 3 more texts from Marcus, each more demanding than the last about signing the divorce papers, moving out of the apartment, and being reasonable about this entire situation. Carrie deleted them all and opened her laptop. The engagement party was being held at Riverside Country Club, a venue that, according to her research, was owned by a subsidiary of Bancroft Holdings. Which meant Carrie technically owned the venue where Marcus and Sienna were planning to celebrate their relationship. The irony was almost too perfect. She pulled up the country club's management contact and composed a brief email identifying herself as the new owner of Bancroft Holdings and requesting a full guest list and floor plan for any events scheduled in the next month. Within an hour, she had everything she needed: the seating chart for the engagement party, the names of every invited guest, and the timeline for the evening's events including the moment when Sienna planned to announce her fake pregnancy. Carrie studied the information, her strategic mind cataloging details and possibilities. Then she placed her hand on her belly and spoke to her daughter. Your timing is going to be very important, little one. If you could arrive in the next week or so, that would be perfect. Give me just enough time to recover, just enough time to prepare. Can you do that for Mama? The baby responded with a hard kick that made Carrie wince and smile simultaneously. I'll take that as a yes. Caroline Bancroft went into labor at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, exactly 13 days before Marcus and Sienna's engagement party. She woke to a sensation like a rubber band snapping deep in her pelvis, followed by a warm gush of fluid that soaked through her pajamas and sheets. For a moment, she lay there in the darkness, her mind struggling to process what was happening. Then another contraction hit, real, unmistakable, rolling from her back around to her belly with enough intensity to make her gasp. The baby was coming. 3 weeks early, but coming. Carrie reached for her phone with shaking hands and called Rebecca. My water just broke. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Have you timed the contractions? This is only the second one. Carrie struggled upright, wincing as another wave of cramping started. Wait, make that the third. How far apart? Carrie checked the timestamps. 4 minutes. They're 4 minutes apart already. Okay, don't panic. I'm getting in the car right now. Pack your hospital bag, put on clean clothes, and do not get in the shower no matter how much you want to. Rebecca, what? I'm terrified. I know, honey. But you've got this. You're a Bancroft, remember? You're tougher than you think. Rebecca's voice was steady, grounding. Now get moving. That baby isn't going to wait for you to process your feelings. 20 minutes later, Carrie was in Rebecca's car, breathing through contractions that were now coming every 3 minutes with alarming regularity. The pre-dawn streets of Riverside were empty, and Rebecca drove with focused efficiency toward Mercy General Hospital. Did you call Marcus? Rebecca asked carefully. No. Carrie, he's still legally your husband. And he's the baby's father. Don't you think? He poured wine on my face and told me I was exhausting. He stole our savings to fund his wedding to another woman. He can find out about his daughter's birth after she's safely here. Another contraction hit, and Carrie gripped the door handle. I don't want him there, Rebecca. I don't want to see his face or hear his voice or deal with his presence during this. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. Okay. Your birth, your choice. But the hospital might require you to list him as the father. They can list him. They can put his name on the birth certificate. But I'm not calling him until after. Carrie breathed through the pain, feeling her body opening, preparing. This is mine, Rebecca. My daughter, my moment. He doesn't get to take this from me too. The hospital admission was a blur of questions, monitors, and medical professionals discussing centimeters and effacement in clinical tones. By the time they wheeled Carrie into a labor and delivery room, she was already 6 centimeters dilated and the contractions were coming hard and fast. You're progressing very quickly for a first time. Mother, the nurse said, checking the fetal monitor. Baby sounds perfect. Strong heartbeat, no signs of distress. How are you doing with the pain? It's manageable, Carrie gasped, which was a lie. Nothing about this was manageable. But she'd spent 5 years managing the impossible, and she could manage this too. We can offer an epidural if you want. No. No drugs. I want to be fully present. Carrie gripped Rebecca's hand as another contraction peaked. I need to be clear-headed. Dr. Kim arrived at 6:30 a.m., checking Carrie's progress with practiced efficiency. 9 centimeters. You'll be ready to push soon. She looked at Carrie with concern. Are you sure about no pain medication? There's no prize for suffering through this. I'm sure. What Carrie couldn't explain was that she needed the pain. Needed to feel every moment of her daughter's arrival, to remember exactly what this cost, to carry the memory of bringing life into the world while Marcus was somewhere else, sleeping peacefully next to his fake pregnant mistress. She would remember this. And someday, when her daughter asked about the day she was born, Carrie would tell her, your father wasn't there. Your mother did this alone. And that's when everything changed. The actual delivery was both eternal and instantaneous. Carrie pushed for 47 minutes, her body doing work it had never done before, following instincts older than language. Rebecca stayed at her side, offering water and encouragement and a hand to crush during the worst contractions. And then, at 7:43 a.m., her daughter arrived. It's a girl, Dr. Kim announced, though Carrie had known that for months. But hearing it made it real in a way ultrasounds never had. They placed the baby on Carrie's chest, tiny, perfect, screaming with healthy lungs. Dark hair plastered to her head, eyes squeezed shut, fists waving in outrage at being evicted from her comfortable home. Hi, Carrie whispered, tears streaming down her face. Hi, baby girl. I'm your mama. I've been waiting to meet you. The baby quieted at her voice, turning toward the sound with instinctive recognition. Carrie counted fingers and toes, marveled at the perfect seashell ears, the rosebud mouth, the tiny nose that was unmistakably Marcus's. She's beautiful, Rebecca said, her own voice thick with tears. Carrie, she's absolutely perfect. 7 pounds, 2 ounces, the nurse announced. 19 inches long. Apgar scores are 9 and 9. She's a healthy girl despite being a few weeks early. They took the baby briefly to clean her and perform the necessary checks, but returned her quickly for skin-to-skin contact. Carrie held her daughter, feeling the weight of this new life, this new responsibility, this new reason to fight. "What's her name?" the nurse asked, preparing the birth certificate paperwork. Carrie looked down at her daughter, thinking about legacy and power and the women who'd come before. "Helena Margaret Whitmore." A pause. "Actually, change that. Helena Margaret Bancroft." Rebecca's head snapped up. "You're not using Marcus's last name? He doesn't get that. He doesn't get to claim her as his when he wasn't here, when he chose someone else, when he threw us away." Carrie's voice was steel-wrapped in exhaustion. "She's a Bancroft. Like her great-grandmother. Like me." The nurse nodded, making notes without comment. Hospital staff saw every kind of family drama imaginable. This barely registered as unusual. After they moved Carrie to a recovery room, after Helena had nursed for the first time with surprising competence, after Rebecca had taken what felt like 1,000 photos, only then did Carrie reach for her phone. She had 32 missed calls. 27 from Marcus, 5 from Patricia Whitmore. The voicemails were escalating exercises in panic and fury. "Caroline, the hospital called me. They said you're in labor. Why didn't you tell me? Call me back immediately. It's been 2 hours. Where are you? Which hospital? I'm your husband, they won't give me information without your permission. This is ridiculous. I know you're angry with me, but this is my child too. You can't just cut me out of this. Call me." And finally, from Patricia, "Caroline, Marcus is beside himself. Whatever issues you two are having, surely you can set them aside for the birth of his child. Please call and let him know where you are." Carrie deleted them all and typed a single text to Marcus: "Your daughter was born at 7:43 a.m. Her name is Helena Margaret Bancroft. She's healthy. I'm fine. That's all you need to know right now." The response came within seconds: "What hospital? I'm coming right now." "No, you're not. I'm recovering and bonding with our daughter. You can meet her tomorrow during visiting hours. 2 to 4 p.m. I'll text you the room number in the morning." "Caroline, you can't do this. I have rights as her father. And you can exercise those rights during the visiting hours I specified. Or you can have your attorney contact mine about formal custody arrangements." Carrie's fingers were steady as she typed. "Your choice, Marcus. But I'm done accommodating your demands." She blocked his number before he could respond and handed the phone to Rebecca. "Don't let me look at it for at least 12 hours. Done." Rebecca pocketed the phone. "How do you feel?" Carrie looked down at Helena, sleeping peacefully in her arms. The baby's tiny hand had wrapped around Carrie's finger with surprising strength, holding on like she knew exactly who her mother was and had no intention of letting go. "Powerful," Carrie said softly. "For the first time in years, I feel absolutely powerful." Marcus arrived at precisely 2 p.m. the next day, carrying an enormous flower arrangement and wearing his most expensive suit. Carrie watched him through the small window in her hospital room door, studying the man she'd married with new eyes. He looked worried, she'd give him that. His hair was slightly disheveled, and there were shadows under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept well. But there was also something calculating in the way he approached the nurse's station, in the charming smile he offered, in the way he checked his appearance in the reflection of a framed artwork. This wasn't a father desperate to meet his daughter. This was a man executing a performance. Rebecca sat in the corner chair, phone in hand, ready to document everything. They'd discussed this. Marcus's first meeting with Helena would be captured for potential future custody proceedings. Not antagonistically, just carefully. Bancroft women planned ahead. Carrie buzzed the nurse. "You can send him in now." Marcus entered like he was stepping onto a stage, the flower arrangement held in front of him like a shield. His eyes went immediately to the bassinet beside Carrie's bed, where Helena slept wrapped in the standard-issue hospital blanket with the pink and blue stripes. "She's here," he said, his voice oddly flat. "You actually had her. Did you think I was making it up?" Carrie adjusted her position carefully, still sore from delivery. "Yes, Marcus. I actually had our baby. Like I've been telling you for 8 months." He set down the flowers and approached the bassinet, his movements hesitant. When he looked at Helena, something flickered across his face: wonder, fear, maybe regret. It was hard to tell. "Can I hold her?" "Sit down first. And wash your hands, there's sanitizer on the table." Marcus complied, settling into the chair beside the bed and accepting the baby with obvious nervousness. Helena stirred at the transfer but didn't wake, her tiny face scrunching up briefly before relaxing again. "She's so small," Marcus whispered. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. Perfectly normal size, even though she came early. "Why didn't you call me?" The question came out more wounded than angry. "Caroline, I should have been here. You shouldn't have gone through this alone." "I wasn't alone. Rebecca was with me." Carrie kept her voice neutral. "And you made your priorities very clear when you poured wine on me and announced your engagement to your mistress. This wasn't your moment, Marcus. It was mine. She's my daughter too." "Is she?" "Because you seemed very excited about Sienna's baby. The one she's supposedly carrying." Carrie watched his face carefully. "How far along is Sienna now? 13 weeks? 14? Something shifted in Marcus's expression. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Just curious." "It must be exciting, planning for one baby while meeting another." Carrie paused. "Though I imagine it's complicated, dividing your attention between your actual daughter and your theoretical one. That's not fair. Neither is stealing our joint savings to fund your wedding. Neither is abandoning your pregnant wife. Neither is a lot of things, Marcus, but here we are." Helena chose that moment to wake up, her eyes opening to stare at Marcus with the unfocused gaze of a newborn. He looked down at her, and Carrie saw tears gathering in his eyes. "I've made mistakes," he said quietly. "I know I have. But Caroline, she's perfect. Can't we figure out a way to be civil about this? For her sake." "Civil, yes. Doormat, no." Carrie held out her arms. "I need to feed her. You should probably go." Marcus hesitated, clearly wanting to argue, but Helena had begun to fuss in that escalating way newborns had when they were hungry. He handed her back carefully, watching as Carrie positioned the baby for nursing with practiced ease that came from doing it successfully a dozen times already. "When can I see her again?" "We'll work out a schedule through our attorneys. Supervised visits until we establish paternity and custody arrangements." Carrie kept her tone businesslike. "I assume you'll want a DNA test." "What?" "No. Why would I? Because you told your family I trapped you with this pregnancy. Because you implied I might have been unfaithful. Because getting it on record now protects both of us legally." Carrie looked at him directly. "Unless you want Sienna to have doubts about whether Helena is yours?" The mention of Sienna's name made Marcus flinch. "Sienna knows Helena is mine." "Does she?" "Because from what I understand, she's been pretty clear about viewing me and this baby as obstacles to your happiness together." Carrie adjusted Helena's position. "I imagine she's not thrilled about you being here right now. She understands this is complicated." "I'm sure she does. Just like I'm sure she's being very supportive about you having a child with another woman while she's supposedly pregnant herself." Carrie smiled without warmth. "You should probably get back to her, actually. Pregnant women can be very demanding, or so I've heard." Marcus stood, confusion and frustration warring on his face. "I don't understand you anymore, Caroline. You're acting like a completely different person." "Maybe I am. Or maybe this is who I always was, and you just never bothered to look closely enough to notice." Carrie returned her attention to Helena, who was nursing contentedly. "The nurse will validate your parking on your way out. After he left, Rebecca released a breath she'd been holding. That was ice cold. That was strategic. I gave him exactly nothing to use against me. I let him hold the baby. I was polite. I suggested DNA testing to remove any future questions about paternity. Carrie looked down at her daughter. And I made sure he left feeling uncertain and off balance. Mission accomplished. He looked like he'd been hit by a truck. Good. Carrie shifted Helena to her other breast, marveling at how natural this felt despite being completely new. Did you get photos? I got everything. Time-stamped, dated, perfect for custody documentation. Rebecca checked her phone. Also, you have an email from Thomas Morrison. Want me to read it? Please. Rebecca opened the laptop and pulled up the email. He says, "Congratulations on Helena's arrival. I hope you're recovering well. Per our discussion, I have filed the necessary paperwork to formally transfer ownership of Bancroft Holdings to you, effective immediately. All documentation is complete. The board has been notified that you'll be assuming active control after your maternity leave." Rebecca looked up. He also says the Harts are scheduled for their annual performance review next week. Perfect timing. Carrie, you just had a baby yesterday. Maybe you should focus on that instead of corporate warfare? I am focusing on my baby. I'm making sure she grows up in a world where her mother is powerful enough to protect her from men like her father. Carrie looked down at Helena, who had finished nursing and was drifting back to sleep. Everything I'm doing is for her, Rebecca. The corporate strategy, the careful planning, all of it. I want her to know that women don't have to accept being discarded. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. Your grandmother would be proud. My grandmother planned all of this. I'm just following her roadmap. Carrie placed Helena back in the bassinet, watching the baby's tiny chest rise and fall with perfect, healthy breathing. Though I think I'm going to add a few touches of my own to her protocols. Such as accepting Sienna's engagement party invitation. What invitation? You weren't invited. Carrie smiled. Not yet. But I will be. Because tomorrow, I'm having Thomas Morrison send a formal request to the Riverside Country Club, which I own, asking for a comprehensive list of all events scheduled for the next month, including guest lists. And when I see my name conspicuously absent from Marcus and Sienna's engagement party, I'm going to RSVP anyway. As what? The discarded ex-wife crashing her replacement's party? As Caroline Bancroft, owner of the venue, inquiring about the event being held on my property. Carrie's voice was pure steel. They're celebrating on my land, Rebecca. In a building I own. Using my resources. The least they can do is let me attend. Rebecca started laughing. You're terrifying. You know that, right? I'm a Bancroft. Terrifying is in our DNA. Over the next week, Carrie recovered with the focused determination that had built her family's empire. Interestingly, her body was doing the impossible work of healing from childbirth while simultaneously feeding another human being and entertainment. She was exhausted. Carrie's eyebrows rose, leaking from places she'd rather not think about, salaries, and utterly in love with the tiny creature who demanded her attention, considering Robert Hart's recent financial troubles. Between feedings and diaper changes and brief bad real estate investment last year. Thomas Morrison visited on day 3, bearing gifts for Helena and legal documents for Carrie. The ownership transfer is complete, he said. She's carrying about $90,000 into the nursing debt across 8 different cards. Mostly 9 a.m. this morning, you are officially the sole owner of Bancroft Holdings and Thomas subsidiary documents, including Riverside Country suggests someone trying very hard to maintain appearances beyond their actual financial capacity for Marcus Whitmore and Sienna Hart and Sienna's designer wardrobe, her perfect appearance, her obvious comfort with luxury. They've been funding her lifestyle. For years, apparently. Sienna has never held a steady job, her event planning business is more hobby than career. But she lives in a luxury apartment, drives a BMW, wears designer labels exclusively. Thomas met Carrie's eyes. All funded by parents who are deeply in debt to maintain their daughter's image. And now they're spending $60,000 on an engagement party. which they're likely financing through more debt. The country club requires a deposit of $30,000, with the balance due the day of the event. Carrie looked down at Helena, who was falling asleep at her breast, milk-drunk and peaceful. What would happen if the venue suddenly became unavailable? Legally, the contract is binding. You'd have to refund their deposit and potentially compensate them for any documented losses from having to find a new venue on short notice. Thomas paused. However, as the new owner, you would be well within your rights to review all upcoming events for compliance with club policies and standards. What kind of compliance? Financial verification, background checks for events over a certain cost threshold, confirmation that the event purpose aligns with the club's values and reputation. Thomas smiled. It's all very standard when ownership changes hands. Due diligence. Carrie understood. She could make attending the party extremely difficult without technically canceling it. Could request additional documentation, financial guarantees, verification of the guest list. Could create enough bureaucratic obstacles that the Harts would be scrambling right up until the event. Or she could let it proceed exactly as planned and simply show up. I want to attend, she said firmly. Not as a gatecrasher. As a guest. Can we make that happen? I can have the club manager extend an invitation as a courtesy to the new owner. Ms. Bancroft would be honored to welcome you to the venue and wishes to ensure your event meets all your expectations. Thomas's tone made it clear this was entirely proper. They'd have no grounds to refuse. Do it. But don't send the invitation until the day before the party. I want them to have as little time as possible to adjust their plans. Devious. Your grandmother would approve. After Thomas left, Carrie sat in her hospital room. She'd extended her stay an extra 2 days, claiming complications that didn't exist but gave her time to strategize, and composed a text to Marcus from her unblocked number. Helena and I will be coming home tomorrow. I'd appreciate it if you'd collect your remaining belongings from the apartment before then. I don't want you to have a key anymore. His response was immediate. That's my daughter's home too. I have a right to be there. Your daughter lives where I live. And I live in the apartment I've been renting since before we married, an apartment you never contributed to financially and have no legal claim to. You can see Helena during scheduled visitation. But you're not welcome in my home anymore. You're being unreasonable. I'm being clear. Tomorrow by 3 p.m., Marcus. After that, I'm changing the locks. She didn't wait for his response before putting her phone down and focusing on Helena, who was awake and staring at her with those unfocused newborn eyes that seemed to see everything and nothing simultaneously. Your father is going to hate me, Carrie whispered to her daughter. He's going to tell you I was difficult and unreasonable and made his life hard. And you know what? He'll be right. I am difficult. I am unreasonable. And I'm going to make his life very, very hard. Helena yawned, unimpressed by the drama, and Carrie laughed, the first genuine laugh she'd managed since the wine incident. But I'm doing it all for you, baby girl. So you grow up knowing that women don't have to accept being treated as disposable. So you understand that power and kindness aren't opposites. So you learn that the best revenge is building something so magnificent that the people who hurt you become irrelevant. Outside her window, Riverside was transitioning from late summer to early fall. In 9 days, the trees at the country club would be showing the first hints of autumn color. The air would be perfect for an outdoor event. And Marcus and Sienna would be celebrating their engagement, announcing their fake pregnancy, and launching their new life together. They had no idea that the woman they'd discarded was planning an entrance that would destroy everything they'd built. But they would learn. Starting in 9 days, Caroline Bancroft was going to remind everyone what happened when you underestimated a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to gain.